Well, our next conversation is absolutely important, and we need you to have your say also on this matter. We're talking about the National Cathedral. We've gone through quite a bit in the past 2 years, maybe. If you've got questions on it still, something on your mind, well, we're going to clear it today. But let's take you through a bit of the process. In 2017, the president cut the sword for the construction of a national Christian cathedral for the country during the 60th year of the country's independence. The cathedral will house an impressive chapels and baptistry, a 5,000-seat auditorium, expandable to 15,000 people for national events and celebrations. It will also have a grand central hall, a music school, and will house Africa's first ever Bible museum and documentation center. But even before work starts on the project, well, the National Cathedral has been caught in a number of controversies, with government coming under more pressure to disclose the cost taxpayers would suffer in the construction of the edifice. Well, this year, the finance minister confirmed the construction of the National Cathedral is estimated to cost over $100 million. Speaking on Asempa FM's Kusi-Boateng program after the budget reading, Mr. Furata also said the government will commit between $10 and $20 million towards the project. Construction is expected to begin in March 2020, and the finance minister is convinced that God will build his temple. All right, so on the back of that, we want to have this conversation with these two gentlemen in the studio. Dr. Paul Opoku-Mensah is Executive Director of the National Cathedral. Reverend Victor Kusi-Boateng is Secretary, Board of Trustees, National Cathedral. Good morning to you, gentlemen. Welcome to the studio.
Good morning.
Well, first of all, I think I should ask in terms of where we are with the building of the cathedral. Where are we?
We really are the preparatory stages. We've almost finished clearing the land. The designs are completed. We are in the tendering process of trying to select a contractor. And so hopefully by the end of the year, we should have a contractor on board. And then...
By the end of 2019?
Yeah.
This is just a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, by the end of the year, or at the very latest, by the first quarter of next year, we should have a contractor on board and then begin with the construction.
And that brings back to mind the demolishing of houses. There was the issue about the judges, but we've gone past that phase.
Yeah. Thank God.
Thank God. Are we done with demolition exercises?
Almost. There are one or two. The Malian embassy has a building there, and partly because of the nature of our diplomatic relationships, you can't just go and demolish it. And so partly, I mean, this also explains why the process has taken a bit of time, that the president has been very concerned that this project really is not implemented within almost a contested framework. And so even the process of relocating people has to go through this almost endless process of consultation, ensuring that people are aggrieved. So even with the judges, I mean, we spent time, went to see the Chief Justice, brought the justices as part of the conversation. And so that is what we are doing now. We are hoping that once again, by January, the last kind of buildings there would also be cleared, and then would have the whole place to ourselves to begin construction.
Do you regret now that you didn't choose, or government didn't give you a location that didn't need demolition exercises, ejecting the kind of people that we're ejecting on the space that has been given?
I think that as trustees, there are no regrets. Considering the authenticity of this project and the benefits the nation will derive from this particular project. Traveling all over the world, you realize that there is nowhere that cathedrals are built in the outskirts of the cities. Everywhere in the world, in New York, in Manhattan, you see a cathedral. In DC, you see a cathedral. In Paris, you see a cathedral. In the UK, in London, you see a cathedral. Why? Because the government saw the need to use cathedrals as part of their building processes. The United States, the United Kingdom, Paris, and the rest of these advanced nations didn't build cathedrals after they had become successful, but they made it as part of their processes. And so as competent and as realistic as the trustees are, we put all these things into perspective. We considered all these, and we realized that there is no point going about taking people's monies to build a cathedral for the nation and then it becomes a white elephant. You want to situate it as where it will be beneficial for the people and it shall be economically viable. And that is why it is very, very prudent to put it where it is. If you look at the demolitions that were made and the benefits the nation will derive, it is obvious that it wasn't a mistake choosing the location.
Why do you think people still disagree with you and have very strong views on this project?
In any project that one embarks on, example, this nation embarks on a free SHS, a very good project that is benefiting a lot of people. You saw the opposition that came with it. A project like the NAPCO that benefited a lot of people, you saw the challenges that it came with. The fact that people have different reactions towards it doesn't make it a bad project, as much as it benefits the masses of the people. And Christians are well over 70 to 75% of the population. And considering the benefits this nation has derived from the Christian community, almost every good school was built by the Christian community. Almost every good hospital, not until recently, was built by the Christian community. Even look at how many people the Christian community has employed. If you consider the employment in terms of clergy of just the Pentecost Church, the clergy, the administrators, their security, their cleaners, Pentecost, Methodists, Assemblies of God, look at Lighthouse Chapel. I believe that the Christian community has employed more than even the private sector has. And so the Christian community has injected so much into this society and is still doing so much. My sister, you can imagine, there are people that feel suicidal, but when they go to church, by listening to just the preaching alone, they go home encouraged. This emotional contribution, these supernatural contribution, these physical contributions, look at the infrastructural base of the Christian community.
Except that that's sharply different from what we are seeking to do in terms of this project.
Let me just quickly come in. Once again, the location. I think the president was very clear that it was because of the purpose that a national cathedral almost introduces a sacred space into the nation-building process of a country. In fact, all nation-building projects, including traditionally, if you go to a traditional nation-building, which is normally the chieftaincy civilization, you have the sacred space in Kunyadam in the Akan tradition. And that is what we have missed as a country. I mean, so if you remember in 2017, the president talked about a missing gap in the nation's architecture. And now that we have a legislature, we have the judiciary, we have a place for the executive, but not the sacred space where the values of a nation really are debated, or where the sacred rituals, activities of a nation takes place. That's why he says we want a national infrastructure where the religious activities, the national events of religious nature takes place. But also in terms of its functions, you have presidential inaugural services, a parliament is just there, the president is sworn in there, he just walks next to this building. But also for state funerals, you have the Osu Cemetery. And so the whole the concept of the National Cathedral also includes almost a processional route directly from the cathedral to the cemetery. Why is it contested? I think as a country, we've not come to terms with our religiosity and its deployment in our transformation. We started off a very deeply religious society, but opted for almost a secular kind of nation building. And yet we know that everything we do has a religious dimension. So it's this tension. And so people are, I mean, they will, like the secretary saying, nobody will contest you building a stadium for 100 million or anything. But the moment it involves religion, there's something about our nation building process which somehow has been almost taken hostage by, I don't want to use the term anti-religious forces, but as a country, we really have to come to terms with the fact that we are a deeply religious society, and even though we've opted for a secular kind of governance, we have to be able to deploy our religion in our transformation. That is what the president is seeking to do by introducing the National Cathedral into a national discourse.
Okay, do you also recognize in terms of what this is costing us? Because initially we were told that it wasn't going to cost the taxpayer. But if you look at the fact that we're demolishing buildings, that's costing. That's costing us some monies because we have to relocate these persons in these structures. And then now with the revelation by the finance minister, we actually know that we are actually also putting in some seed money. That was not, we didn't do paper to pen kind of agreement, but that's not what we were told.
Somehow, I think what did the president say when he said this was going to be a legacy project, a national monument. By definition, national monuments are built by the state, by definition. But then he said, and once again, let's go back. He says, look, I don't want this to be a burden on the finances of the state. And so I'm going to mobilize the Christian community to support us. He never said that this was going to be a solely private affair. It is a national monument. It's the state which is going to own it. The trustees are going to hold it in trust for the people of Ghana. But it is a national monument. And if you look at the functions, but what the president is saying is that this country, our history shows that the church has always partnered the state. Everything from education, agriculture, he talked about all the educational institutions. And so the state is willing to put in a bit and mobilize the church to do what is actually the responsibility of the state, to create the sacred infrastructure. The churches and the trustees have taken upon themselves to say, look, this is important because it also impacts the Christian community. So we are going to support it. In addition to mobilizing, fundraising for the construction, the trustees also felt that, look, given our history, a project like this, if left on its own, given the way we've managed our national infrastructure, will really go to waste. So they've almost incorporated income-generating activities into the project. So even today, we are having a visit by the president of the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C., which is a very viable, one of the latest museums in the world, actually, not just the U.S., and which has become also economically viable. We want to understand some of the procedures, the processes of ensuring that when the cathedral is built, it does not just become, once again, following the president's wish, it does not become a burden, that we can generate the resources internally to maintain the building. So I think what you started off with, we really need almost to come to closure with the concept of the national, it is a national monument.
So can we clear this up?
The community is being mobilized to help build it.
Are we doing this because the president wants it? Are we doing it because the Christian community wants it? Are we doing this because the state needs it?
I think all three. First, the state needs a sacred infrastructure. All nation building projects, all. I mean, we can debate this. Every nation building project, for it to be successful, needs a sacred infrastructure. And that's what the president alluded to, that so almost, I think the president is almost trying to help us to reset our nation building project, which actually got truncated. After Nkrumah, we really haven't systematically began to build the infrastructure for transformation. Even if you look at the railways, we've talked about railways for how many years, since Goggisberg. But he says, look, I want us to move beyond Goggisberg to really put in place the infrastructure for our long-term transformation. And that also includes this sacred infrastructure. So first and foremost, even though all of us might not even see it immediately, it is the state which needs a sacred infrastructure. And then secondly, the president talks about building cohesion. You have a divided 75% of our population who are almost divided. This infrastructure helps us to create social cohesion by creating a platform where you can actually congregate all the Christians in this country. That allows you, particularly in a context where our politics is so divided. I mean, almost everything we do divides us. But at least you have one infrastructure which, even if only Christians are going to be there, allows 70% of the population to gather. And that helps you in creating cohesion. And that's what the Supreme Court actually talked about, that in kind of giving the go-ahead for the project, that the project itself will allow the nation to build cohesion, because it allows all the... And
so I take it that the judiciary doesn't have any reservations at this point.
We've never seen the judiciary contest us. It is the people around who were talking, but the
because
judiciary
obviously judges won't publicly say how they feel.
Nobody contested us from the judiciary, so we assume that they should be okay. When we met with the CJ, they were okay.
Look, we met the Chief Justice. You see, our judiciary really are those who actually understand nation building. I mean, and that's why we actually took time to engage them. We were very, very conscious that the judiciary is one of the sacred, almost, institutions in nation building. And so we had to almost seek their blessing. The president had said, look, we're going to give you this land. The trustees could have said, look, clear the space for us. But they actually asked the chairman, Bishop Akrofi, and myself to actually go to the Chief Justice to almost ask for her blessing for something that had already been promised by the state. Because of the sacred nature of the institution, the conversations were said, they do understand it. The judiciary really, and that's, I think, one of the good things we have as a country, that we have almost an institution that is insulated from our politics, and so that can look at the long-term trends. It means if they were not satisfied that this was a viable project that was going to unite this country, they would have kicked against it.
So the finance minister says that we're committing between 10 and 20, that's all of us, 10 and 20 million. How much of it do you have now?
He said it, but we are now going through the processes of assessing it. So in due season, when we're able to assess it, we'll put it into the public domain. But it is in the budget. The fact that it was stipulated in the budget does not mean you assess it the next day. We're going through the processes, and we are determined to start construction by early next year.
This is also going to cost us in total $100 million, correct?
More than $100 million, like he said. The reason is because, you see, in building, you go through processes. You don't just come up with figures. You start with the architectural drawing. From there, it goes to the structural engineer. From there, it goes to the services engineer. From the services engineer, it goes to the landscapers. From them, it goes to the quantity surveyors. It is the quantity surveyor that can give you the actuals of your project. Unfortunately for us, this is a massive project. So it takes a longer time to come up with the structures, with the architectural drawings, and with all these. By the grace of God, we are almost 60–70% through. So we can come up with the actual figures when the quantities are through with their job. But that is not to say you cannot start construction. In the construction world, once you are through with 50–60% of your drawings, you can start constructions and come up with estimations, after which, when the quantities come up with their figures, then you can be very, very certain that this is how much it's going to cost.
Can you describe the secretariat as we have it? Because now it's been set up.
The secretariat is very, very, very thin organization. In fact, you have the executive secretary, you have an operations manager, and then the rest are really almost interns. So it's a very, very slim.
Okay, because my question was going to be, who is funding the secretariat?
The state. I think if you look at last year's budget, the finance minister indicated the role of the state in this project. And the role of the state was, one, providing the land, the secretariat, and seed money. Really, you see, what we have tried to do, and partly because of our own respect for the people who are leading this project. These are the leading clergymen in our country. You see, we are trying to be as transparent as possible. You see, we can't, it's almost, we have a sacred duty, partly because we say this is for God, that we can't hide things, and also because out of respect for the leadership of the churches, everything we do. So sometimes people say, why are you coming up with this information? We have to, partly because of the nature of the project, but also the leadership. We don't want to undermine the credibility of the church leaders, the trustees. So there's nothing that to be hidden about this project. I mean, you guys are there to make sure that nothing is hidden, by the way. But also by the very nature of the project, we've promised as a secretariat that one, will be transparent, and that's why even fundraising, we are ensuring that we have the mechanism, the procedures, the processes to be in place before we actually go on aggressive fundraising, so that we can be reporting almost on a weekly, monthly basis. Second, that whatever we do is in the public domain, and that we can kind of legitimately account. But more importantly also, that we don't want to develop this within the contested framework within which all national projects, and there has to be a certain reverence for the implementation of this project. And that's why sometimes we actually shy away from the media, because we don't want to almost come literally fighting over such a project. It is, I think yesterday you said something about that God will build this cathedral or something like that. You said that the finance minister
said. Yes, finance also said yes.
I believe that, I mean, fundamentally, that God will build this cathedral.
And with the determination of the trustees, we wish the nation helps us and helps us well. But if the nation doesn't help us, it will not deter the trustees from carrying on this vision.
When you say nation helping you, what does that mean? The state is already committed and given the land, setting up the secretariat, and given seed money.
Exactly.
That's our, because we are paying ultimately for it.
We are Christians are part.
Yes,
we are part of our contributions are part of the taxpayers' money.
Absolutely.
So we all have to understand that as much as these seed monies and these supports are coming, it's justifiable, because believers are also Christians.
What more do you want Ghanaians to do? What
I mean is that if the Ghanaian populace think that the nation should give us more than whatever the finance ministry wants to give us, we will embrace it. If they fight it and the finance ministry says today we are no more going to give you the seed money, it will not stop the construction.
Okay, is it sounding to me like, you would love more than 10, 20 million?
Sure, if the nation even wants to shoulder everything, why not? We would. We would. We just want the cathedral built. So if the nation helps us more, fine. If it doesn't help us, we are ready to stretch our hands and go to the lengths and breadths of the world and see to it that this construction is completed within 5 years.
But also, you see, the president also talked about building a coalition when he launched the fundraising campaign on December 28th last year. That if you look at the history of the great cathedral, even from biblically, the temple, the synagogues, I mean, what is unique, what characterizes these great cathedrals is really almost this collective engagement in the project. And so part of the trustees, at least what they have, the money they've given to us, is really to ensure that we mobilize as many Ghanaians as possible. Even if they give one cedi, it's just this idea that this is a national project to which we contributed. That's whole mobilization. So that's part of what we're talking about, the nation helping and kind of us mobilizing the whole country behind this project.
I want to encourage you, if you're watching us, you've got questions, well, now is the time. Send them through via WhatsApp. We're going to put the number on the screen. You can send us questions. My guest, if you're just joining the conversation, we're talking everything about the National Cathedral. Dr. Paul Opoku-Mensah is Executive Director of the National Cathedral. Also in the studio is Reverend Victor Kusi-Boateng, who is Secretary Board of Trustees, National Cathedral. So send us your questions via WhatsApp. I'm just going to pass it on, and they would give you the responses. Reverend Kusi-Boateng, yesterday you did disclose that former Presidents Mahama and Rawlings have given their blessings to this project. What does that really mean?
As the Executive Director said, we really wanted the inclusion of all and sundry. And so we saw the need to do a broad consultation and to try to go to as many people as are possible to officially inform them of the building of the National Cathedral. And so that was the drive that took us to the former President John Mahama, former President J.J. Rawlings. In fact, we were supposed to go to even His Excellency President Kufuor, but he was out of town. So we went to all these people and they gave us their blessing.
What did they say exactly? Like, you know, and I'm sure you understand why I'm asking this.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, we want to discuss kind of, like we're doing here, the state of the project, and they came up with their own understanding of the project, why they think it's important, but also some of the concerns, including like the land and everything. So I remember President Mahama saying, look, this is something he can contest. He wants to see us manage this, implement this within a national, not a partisan framework. And once that is done, it has his support. And in fact, he actually promised to come to the fundraising line, but he said we had another program. I think that was when they were both in these regions or something.
Okay.
And then President Rawlings, I was very fascinated actually when we went to President Rawlings. I mean, he was able to articulate the essence really of the National Cathedral. Yeah. In fact, in more ways that actually he took over, I mean, to really explain the essence.
Okay.
Once again, I think what I liked about that engagement is really the fact that they also understood the context and the contestations and the issues, and so brought all those up and almost charged us that, look, this is a good project, but it has these issues. And so our job is to ensure that we are almost able to build consensus around it.
Okay. So what were the specific issues? Is it make sure it's not partisan?
For President Mahama, I think for President Mahama, he was very concerned that this does not, or this is not implemented within a partisan framework, that this is something that should unite the country. And so the implementation, both by perception but also in practice, must be within a unified national framework. And this is what we are doing. Rawlings, in fact, Rawlings' actually main concern really was that, look, everything about the cathedral, in fact, he actually thought it was long overdue. And that he thinks his church seems to have some issues with it, the Catholic Church, and so we should address that because he will support whatever his church. So as an individual, he sees all the good things about the cathedral, and he came to the launch of the campaign.
All churches in on this? Are all churches in on this?
We have to mobilize. You know, I mean, that's why the president put together this eminent group of church leaders, and that the role of the trustees is really to embed this within the churches. I think that the first year has really been on the preparatory work. So the mobilization, I think the Reverend Kusi-Boateng can speak more to it. The mobilization for the churches ongoing. So the vision, really, the goal is to ensure that this becomes something that is embedded and owned by the churches, the Christians in this country. And I think the trustees have their own strategy to ensure that this is done, and he can speak to it.
Do you want to add anything to it?
Sure. Like I said days ago, there is no model that we are following. We are rather creating our models because this is a new project. And so we are putting a lot of things, a lot of work is going in. And very, very soon, we are coming up with strategies that will reach out to every single believer in Ghana. Our strategy is to target between 70 to 95% of all Christians in Ghana. And so the systems are being developed, and within a couple of weeks and months, you see us going out so strong and opening up this whole concept and this vision.
Okay, let's share some of the messages that have come through. From Dogan Isefiri also says, please find out from Dr. Opoku-Mensah for me, must all national monuments be situated in Accra? That's a question directly coming to you. Why can't the cathedral, here's another one, why can't the cathedral be built elsewhere instead of concentrating everything in the national capital? This one says, good morning, Mama V. I want to know from Reverend if he will accept for National Shrine Cathedral to be built here in Ghana. All right. This one says, are they going to allow all Ghanaians to contribute towards the cathedral in cash and in items? Here's another one says, why won't we always cut our coat according to our sites? A lot of communities are deprived of schools, roads, and you're going to use such a huge sum for something. There's no solidarity. Helping the needy is equally a greater form of worship. Okay. This is Samad Yaya in Wa. So maybe we can address some of these issues. First is why?
Thing in Accra.
Yes.
We want to see national monuments spread across the country. In fact, because that's how you engender patriotism. I mean, people should be able to see monuments in all parts of the country. And I think as a country, we almost have to have a policy of decentralizing our monuments. The National Cathedral, as we've indicated, has to be in the capital because of its functions. So that's really the answer. It's because of the functions of the National Cathedral. That's why it has to be in the capital. But in principle, and as a matter of state policy, monuments must be spread across the country.
Okay. Would you accept a national shrine? I'm sure you've heard about it.
I'm not here for the traditionalists. I'm here for the believers.
Absolutely. But you're also Ghanaian. You're a citizen.
Yes. And if traditionalists can also prove the kind of contributions, their percentages, and how they qualify to have a national shrine, it is up to them to go in for it. That we can't speak about it, but I can say on authority that the kind of contribution, the kind of Christian contribution in this nation cannot be underestimated. So it would be very unfair to compare traditionalists and the Christian community, because I'm yet to see one traditional school that has been built, one traditional hospital that has been built. I don't know how many people the traditional body has ever employed in this country. And I don't know the purpose of a traditional, shrine and the benefits it can give to the nation.
But this hints actually came from a minister of states.
I think he was misquoted.
Was he?
I think he said, but at a matter of principle, I fundamentally believe that, like the president has said, you see, we are a deeply religious society. We should deploy our religion in our nation building. And the Supreme Court has also indicated that. And I think that given the contested, polarized nature of our politics, if we can really deploy religion, so if what it takes to create cohesion is for the state to build infrastructure I have no problem with it, actually. If it is on the basis of building cohesion, as the Supreme Court indicates, then I think it's in the interest of our country, given the polarized nature of our politics, to really almost deploy religion to create cohesion.
Okay.
And if national infrastructure for the various faith communities is what is going to do it, here I'm speaking as an individual.
Okay.
I really think it's important.
So that's interesting, because his opinion is quite different from
right,
yours
so that's what
on
I'm saying.
this
Here I'm
matter.
talking as an individual,
Absolutely.
as a Ghanaian. But I really think that who fundamentally believes that we need almost to create cohesion in our country, given the polarized nature of our politics, and we need to begin to look at the institutions that will allow us to create cohesion. And I think that we are a deeply religious nation. Religion is potentially can create the cohesion we need. And so and here we are not talking about the churches going to build it. If we as a country agree that we need cohesion and religion can help us achieve it,
then so be it. Let's do it.
If infrastructure is what is going to help us do that, I really think we should. It's just
Okay.
like chieftaincy also.
So Reverend Kusi-Boateng thinks that there must be a certain basis for it.
Right.
You must be able to make a case based on something.
It's so obvious that it's been proven that cathedrals help in the infrastructural development of nations. But I'm yet to see one shrine, except be able to prove it to convince the nation we need a national shrine. But I say it on authority that cathedrals have been proven worldwide, and history proves it, that cathedrals could be part of infrastructural development.
Okay, and on that point, I will need you to expand a little. How?
How? It's very obvious. In the event that we finish building National Cathedral, you can imagine how many tourists will come in just because of the National Cathedral and not just what it entails. Why will France raise 1.3 billion to renovate one cathedral that was burnt? Why would the nation do that? Because they realize that besides its sacredness and besides its economic importance, it is something that is worth contributing to. That is why 2 months after it gone burnt, individuals have contributed 1.3 billion euros to rebuild a cathedral that was burnt. The question is why?
Let's take some of more of your messages. Gaspard in Was says, building a cathedral for the nation is a brilliant idea. Please proceed to to execute. This one says, okay, this one says, National Cathedral is a good thing and that will help. We'll come to how people who are volunteering to help can help even at this point. This one says, building the National Cathedral is a great effort. God bless the brains behind this. I like, okay, Bernard Ado in Konongo. Thank you very much for the second part of the message as well. This one says, great conversation this morning. May I know the processes put in place to allow ordinary citizens to make their contribution and donation? And you're citing an example, mobile money, bank accounts. It's from Emmanuel QA Danso. We'll come to that. This one says, good morning, JoyNews. My problem with them is the use of the state land. This one says, why building cathedral when so many towns and villages in Ghana don't even have good drinking water? This one says, please ask them to throw more lights on its users. People are only having perception that it is an edifice for only church, a place of worship. It goes far beyond that. From Akko, KK from Salt Pond sending this message. This one says, my name is Tony inside Upper East. They should also look at how that cathedral will have impact on the common man's life. This one says, okay, lots of messages. Do your panelists sincerely believe that, given the fact that several of our children sit on the floor and the trees and write on the floor, God will see this as a priority? That's Dr. Tuapani in Dodo sending this message. Here's another one, says the National Cathedral will never change anything as a nation. The Rwandans are making phones and we're here building cathedral with this huge amount of money. That's from Vahid from, is it Baudier or something? Apologies if I didn't pronounce that. This one says, please give something to last thousands of years. Abekwin Mankasim says so. This one says, I'm Raphael Kofi Dawolo from Akosombo. I want to know, apart from Accra, is there no place that they can build this cathedral? Okay, I think we've talked about this. This one says, Reverend saying that whether or not the nation support the project will still go on. Now the state bungalows, public offices and all that are already from the state, right? More is given to those who show gratitude. Abdul Mutalib in Tamale says so. This one says, building a national cathedral isn't a problem. Reverend ministers should, however, understand that destroying properties and compensating the owners of those properties just to make way for the project is simply preposterous. NS from Kuku, I had to cut short the message, but I guess the part of it has been shared. This one says, and this will probably be the last one, will the cathedral be built for only religious believers or for the entire public, including people who don't share in that belief? Maybe we can start from here.
Okay, so I think, yeah, exactly. And I think it actually relates to the first question about the users. I think Reverend Kusi-Boateng alluded to it, that the president said he was bequeathing to the nation a national cathedral. At least he wants to bequeath to the nation. So what exactly is this? So one is the first, kind of the whole infrastructure for national events of a religious nature. But then you also have in facilities, conference centers, and then you talked about Africa's first Bible museum. What we want to do really, once again, is also a project, yes, to almost celebrate our heritage as a country. We want to ask the question, when the Bible entered in this country, what happened? So it's not just a collection of Bibles. So when the Bible came to Ghana, you had schools. So if you go in there, you see the history of schools, you see the churches that have been. And so every Ghanaian that goes into the museum is really able to almost see part of his or her heritage. You see the school you went to, the hospitals that came as a result of the Bible coming into Ghana, the agricultural development, the health facilities, and that also becomes kind of the basis to almost make this place economically viable. But one of the most important parts of the cathedral really is the idea of bequeathing to the nation a national park. So if you look at the concept, the design, it includes a gracious parkland, which is really what we miss in the country, a place where people can just go on a Sunday. I mean, contemplative place.
Or even on a working day.
On a working day, exactly. You close from work. And what we want to do, and he was talking about the fact that this president of the Museum of the Bible is coming, he's also one of the key people in the world who's built these theme parks. He was responsible for the Creation Museum, the Ark Experience, the Nazareth Village in Israel. So he's also going to help us. How do you ensure that this park also becomes almost a theme park?
So can anybody go there, or
everybody.
this is just a place reserved for Christians?
No, the park is a national park. So the cathedral is bequeathing to the nation this park, gracious park, that everybody, every Ghanaian can go there. And all the other facilities in there, in fact, including the auditorium. I mean,
one of the things I heard, I think in the very early stages of the cathedral was, would you accept if somebody, other religious groupings came to hire the facility for their programs?
What programs?
You know, I think so knowing the foundation of it, like where we are coming from in terms of the cathedral, if somebody, for instance, the traditionalists want to come and hire the place,
the main auditorium,
where you have and use it for their programs, would that be acceptable?
No, the altar, no. That is a fundamentally Christian altar. And so part of the reason why the president also wants the Christian community to support it is that this sacred infrastructure is fundamentally a Christian one. But it also reflects the fact that, you see, our nation building project is actually located within this Judeo-Christian tradition because of how we're colonized. So by default, why, I mean, when you hear people shouting, it's because by default, our nation building project started within this Judeo-Christian tradition because we're colonized by the English. And that's why almost all our nation building rituals, even in parliament, here start on that tradition. And that is also, so is in a sense an extension of that historical reality. But it's also a reality of the fact that now in fact, Christianity has almost become an indigenous religion. I think those who brought Christianity here, if they come to your church, will be wondering what happened. It's been so indigenized, it's almost become a national religion. And 75% of those people are, and so that the sanctity of that religious belief has to be respected.
So this is restricted in a certain sense.
The altar, I think the altar, yes.
All right, I mean, so people are also asking, can they contribute cash, kind, how?
Sure, they could. People have started contributing. I met one of my leaders a few days ago. He says, Papa, do you know I put in 100,000 Ghana cedis towards the cathedral? He showed me the receipts. People are contributing, although we've not started the full-fledged fundraising campaign. It's all because we want to put together a platform that cannot be broken through with very strong security and all that, so people can test to contribute and all that. But not until we are through with that. We have bank accounts with Fidelity Bank, with ADB, with Ghana Commercial Bank.
Okay.
People are contributing. When they bring the statement, people are contributing all over.
Okay. So please mention the banks again.
Fidelity Bank, ADB, and Ghana Commercial Bank.
So people can just walk in and say they want to contribute to the National Cathedral, and they will give them the necessary.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if you're on the webpage, we have this www.nationalcathedralghana.org. There is a platform where you can actually make donations.
Okay. I was just going to say, you know, you're a church person. You know how people make pledges sometimes and it never comes through.
Yes.
But it's amazing. Even before we started we inaugurated the fundraising, somebody had given us 2 million. People are giving us millions. Yeah. People are giving us thousands. People have committed themselves in cash and in kind. So people are excited. The enthusiasm, I know that there could be Tobias and Sambalas. There could be people that will fight against it, but still the ones that are ready to help us build are more.
But do you also appreciate that some of the people who object to this project are Christians?
Yes, we do. And we understand them. We understand their concerns. We do.
Would we ever get to a point where, are you thinking of bringing all the people who disagree with the projects coming together? Do you have plans to convince them, or you're thinking, okay, let them believe in what they want to believe?
As a leader, that is an impossibility. There is no way you can convince everybody before a project rolls. People could be informed, but you cannot guarantee they'll be convinced. We are doing the best that we can. That is why we are here today. to let the public understand the concept of the National Cathedral.
I can't let you go without bringing in, it was in some of the messages, people cite the fact that the children who are under trees, the people who don't have drinking water, the basic amenities that we don't have as a country, and the fact that a cathedral is a priority is an issue to them.
But I think it's not an either or. I mean, I think if you want to look at it at this, even within the framework of these government policies, I think, one, you have free education, which is costing us so much. You have the Minister of Finance was talking about infrastructure for schools. So the idea that somehow the National Cathedral is taken away from all this, we're actually seeing an expansion of these programs. So as a nation, we are not building a National Cathedral at the expense of other programs. In fact, we are actually accelerating some of the programs to ensure that not only do we have access to education for everybody, but that also the quality of the assets, infrastructure, is also going to be developed. So there are policies in place. Even if you take all the money from the National Cathedral, you're still not going to address this. So I think the critical issue for a country is to say, look, these are the dimensions, the elements of nation building. It includes education, health, it includes cohesion, and begin to look at the ways in which we can satisfy all this rather than pitting one project against each other. That's not how nations are built. You build it in a unified, cohesive whole rather than just picking one, only education or health, and concentrate on it.
All these, I don't know, all these messages are meant for this conversation, but obviously because of time, we can't read every single message. I do pray and hope that what you wanted to ask has already been answered. Otherwise, you know, you can visit the secretariat.
Right.
Can people visit the secretariat?
Yeah, actually, I'll bring you. We've actually begun. Also, as part of the public education, we just started with a National Cathedral update, a newsletter.
Okay.
We had the first issue just a month ago. I actually have some in the car. I'll bring them up once we go. I forgot to bring them up. It's part of this effort. It's not really to say like, we want to convince everybody, but that we have a responsibility to explain. The stat we have this.
There's one of the messages that's asking how many people the cathedral is employing.
Directly and indirectly, we need to really sit down with the architects and the contractors to be able to tell. But I can tell you it will be in the hundreds and in thousands, direct and indirect.
All right, we have to leave this conversation here, but this is also still developing. So if we have to come back to you for further clarification on any of the issues, I hope that you receive us. So Dr. Paul Opoku-Mensah, Executive Director, National Cathedral, Reverend Victor Kusi-Boateng, Secretary, Board of Trustees, National Cathedral. And I do pray and hope that, you know, what is mostly on your heart we've talked about, but we can always go back for more.